our host. We'll start off by asking each of our guests to talk a little bit about themselves, how they got in their current positions, and then Harry will run us through some questions and talk a little bit about both the teams. Todd, we'll start off with you.
All right. Thanks, Mike. I can barely remember back to starting at Valpo. It's been a long time. I graduated from Indiana University in '89. And by 90, I was hired as a sports director at a group of radio stations based in Valparaiso. Nobody was actually doing Valpo football or basketball at that time. A lot of high school games were broadcast. And I remember when I interviewed for the job, I said, nobody does any of the university games. And at that point, both teams were really bad, to be honest with you. In fact, I think through Homer Drew's first 4 years, he had won 10 games in 1 year, but no more than 5 games in the next 3 years. And I remember saying, well, I'm really interested in college football and basketball play-by-play. So, well, if the teams get good, then we'll definitely do the games. We've done the games in the past, and if they get good, so I actually did high school games for a number of seasons. Then my second year there, we did start broadcasting Valpo University football. That was in '91. And then the following year, Valpo had some transfers in it. And we knew at that point that the program was kind of on the rise. Casey Schmidt had transferred in from Arizona. Dave Redmond, who recently has passed away, both eventually became Hall of Famers. David transferred back. Both played at Valpo High. And I think by '92, we knew how good the team was, and they started broadcasting the games. And then so that was my first year, '92, '93. This was my 31st season. And over the years, we've moved around to different stations. And for the past, it's been nearly 20 years now, the university has owned the rights to the games. And I basically broadcast for the university. And then a number of years ago, when Valpo was in the Horizon League, we did where the radio broadcast was broadcast over was then the Horizon League network. And we moved to the Valley, and the discussion was, well, in the Valley, they really want to have a separate broadcast from radio to the stream. And the agreement was made for me to just broadcast the stream on the home games and then go on the road for the radio. So I've done, there's a couple guys in the league, I think, do it the same way. And I'm one of those guys that half the year I'm doing basically TV, and the other half of the year I'm doing radio.
Thank you, Todd. Appreciate it. And Steve, you're also on the air for the Belmont Bruins. Talk about the start of your career and calling games for Belmont.
Yeah, well, very similar role now to what Todd does. We do the linear stream or the TV call, if you will, at home here at Belmont, and then do the radio call when we're on the road. But I grew up as someone who wanted to do play-by-play kind of my entire life. It was sort of the first dream I had as a kid growing up in Champaign, Illinois. So right in the heart of Valley country, ISU's just up the road, and saw games from Bradley and all sorts of schools around there. And I got involved at a pretty young age. I got hurt playing baseball, and just a blessing, I guess, of living in Champaign, a town that's big enough that had University of Illinois athletics and really cool things to be around and cover, but small enough that they would let a 16-year-old kid with absolutely no experience come in and say, hey, I'd be willing to answer your phones or take out the garbage if you just let me hang around with you guys for a little bit. And they were, dumb enough to let the 16-year-old come in and do that. And I guess I, made a couple good impressions or whatever. And so I started off actually doing a little league baseball game of the week, believe it or not, back in the day, and then got a little bit of high school experience and got into college and was just fortunate, got a couple breaks. I started co-hosting the nightly drive time sports talk show there with a guy named Steve Kelly, who's been in the market for a long time. Learned a ton from him. And then that spring, Illinois brought me on to do part of their baseball broadcast with Dave Lone. And then he was doing TV for volleyball and women's basketball at the time. So about 10 dates of both of those schedules, they needed somebody to do play-by-play. And so then they brought me in as the co in that as well. So I do play-by-play 10 games a year and do color for the rest of it. And it was just really incredible experience growing up in college. I studied journalism at the U of I, and my past sort of took me in more of a television realm. And so I got a job in Tulsa, Oklahoma, right out of school at the Fox affiliate there. I was there for 4.5 years, became sports director, and then came here in 2011 to the CBS TV station here in Nashville. And I've been here ever since as the main sports anchor here. And then just last year, literally the night before the season happened, Belmont's play-by-play guy, John Freeman, who was a University of Virginia graduate, got their job because their guy became the Bucks play-by-play guy, if I have the story right. But it was the night before the season, and they'd had some conversations with me in the past, and the schedule never quite worked with the TV thing. Well, I guess they were up a creek at this point and just said, "Hey, Steve, would you still want to do it? And could you do it tomorrow?" And I said, "I'll see if I can make it work." And, I guess the rest is history, but it's been a blast because it really has kind of got me back to my roots, and Casey and the team are just the best to be around. So it's a lot of fun. I say all the time, when you live in Nashville and you cover sports in Nashville, you realize there's something kind of different about Belmont and the people who work there in the school. But if you're not actually in it, it's kind of hard to put your finger on exactly what it is. You just know it's different. Well, I've had the experience the last 2 years to be in it, and it's better than I even imagined. So it's really been a lot of fun.
Thank you, Steve. And both Steve and Todd, one thing that's been constant through our series here is that everybody's got a unique path to where they've been. And the other constant, of course, is Harry Schroeder. Harry, turn it over to you.
I'm constant, all right. Hey, Steve, I did want to ask you about that. I had met John last year because he was new. He had only been there about a year.
Right.
And then all of a sudden he was gone, and bang, yeah, can you do it tomorrow? That had to be pretty surreal. And talk about trying to get up to speed. I think maybe Evansville was your first game or something like that. Talk about just having to get up to speed and get rolling.
Yeah, it was totally wild. I hadn't honestly done play-by-play since college, actually, just because, like I said, my career path took me in another direction. But I talked to him a few times because their longtime play-by-play guy, Kevin Ingram, is now the Vanderbilt play-by-play guy.
Right.
And so as that was all kind of working its way out, it took about a 2-year path for him to actually move into that role. They'd talked to me basically for the entire 2 years if it could work. And so it wasn't something that was completely out of left field, I guess I would say, which was good. And I've covered the team a lot. I mean, I love Coach Bird. I played tennis with him in the summer. I've been around the team and I knew the guys. So it wasn't too hard to jump in and understand who they were. But certainly there were a few guys that I wasn't totally up to speed on, probably as well as I should have been in that first game. But I guess to some degree, it's like riding a bike. If you love it, you get back on pretty quick and you learn how to go.
Well, you do a great job. You and Greg Sage do a great job. And that leads me into a question for you, Todd. I think Greg there at Belmont and Brandon there at Valpo are two of the very best guys at what they do in terms of providing sports information to the rest of us. Brag a little bit about Brandon, if you would, Todd.
Well, Brandon's my color guy on the road for football and basketball. And he's well beyond his years. He seems like he's been in the business for 30 years or 35. He's just really a perfectionist and does an incredible job and kind of never gets rattled with anything, whether it comes to, a late announcement about a player or something that has to take place on the air or something going on off the air that he's got to take care of when he's on the air. And obviously, you look at his notes and his preparation and then the availability he has, really, he's an absolute pros pro. I think, Valpo, I look at a lot of the people at Valpo and I go, Valpo's lucky to have him, but Brandon's really at the top of the list. I depend on him a lot. And I know, like, when media from outside Valpo come in to do a game or he is really, he, like I said, pros pro, he is on top of things. Up and down, and I know the Valley feels very fortunate that he's in that position where he can help out, and I'm very thankful that he was a Valpo grad. I knew him as a student, and I kind of, when the job opened right around the time he graduated, I really pushed hard. I said, this is the guy. We're lucky to get a guy like this, and hopefully we can keep him for a long time. We'll see, but you're right. He does about as good a job as imaginable.
I want to talk about some serious stuff though with you, Todd. You're something of a professional poker player. Like, tell us a little bit about your poker credentials and how engaged you are in that world.
Wow. Let's put it this way. And I don't know if this resonates as something that maybe I should have my head looked at. I probably play some sort of poker about 360 out of 365 days a year.
Wow.
Which sounds insane, but that would probably be the number. And a lot of it is online, but I play a lot of live games as well. I had a boss once tell me, it's hard to make a lot of money in sportscasting. He goes, you ought to use it as a hobby. And I'd played poker basically my entire life, going back to probably when I was 9, 10, 11 years old. We all played, and we played for years. And I played all throughout college, and I never really stopped playing. But I was working full-time in radio, back in the late 80s throughout the early 90s, all the way up until about 2000. But I was always playing some poker, and it always done well. And I just kept playing. I do go to the World Series of Poker every year, which is not just the one main event, which people see on TV and hear about it. It's actually about a 7-week visit to Las Vegas. I don't go for all 7 weeks, but there's tournaments every day for about 50 days, starting in late May and running through the middle of July. I've cashed in numerous World Series events. I've gone to final tables. I finished as high as 4th in a very strong event back in 2016. And I play a lot of cash games. I'll play a cash game today. I played online last night. Just trying to supplement the income, which is not great, as most of us know, especially in the play-by-play world. But we do what we can, and I do what I can to help support my family. And I view it just simply as a job. I study it. Like I said, I play as often as I can. Just sometimes I get in a little. In fact, recently I kind of felt like I was in a little bit of a poker rut. Like, maybe I need a break or two, and the break lasted a day or two. But that's just the world I live in, I guess.
And are you the one that got Paul Oren to get involved in it? I think it was a year ago or 2 years ago when he went to the World Series of Poker.
This was really an amazing story. Paul has actually loved poker for as long as I've known him, and we've talked strategy throughout the course of the years. We actually have, ironically, we both have some friends that we only know separately through poker, which is kind of a unique thing. And like, then the friends would put it all together. Oh, you're from Valpo. You cover sports in Valpo. Do you know Paul Oren type stuff?
That's fun.
But Paul made a great run in the main event. He qualified just before the start of the main event through an online tournament. And in a field of nearly 8,000, he finished somewhere in around 500 and made about $10,000 for Paul, as a sports writer. The same thing. Any sort of extra income you can get is certainly very helpful, but really proud of him. We were talking every day throughout the course of the tournament, and he did a phenomenal job, and actually got very unlucky on the hand he got knocked out on. Otherwise he could have gone really, really deep in that tournament, which could have been a big score for him. But great experience for him. I know he still talks about it. It's a great memory. A couple times I've gone very deep in events, and those memories kind of sit with you sort of for the rest of your life. And you remember more about how you ended up getting knocked out than anything that happened throughout the course of the week.
That's funny. Steve, I wanted to ask you about juggling the TV job and doing the Belmont games. How does that, your schedule has to be awful tight. Tell us just a little bit about that.
Well, just for example, we played in Missouri State on Wednesday, and the team flew over on Tuesday, as most teams would for a trip like that. And I had to do TV on Tuesday night. I was taking Wednesday off for the game, but you just only have so many vacation days out there. And so I had to be here Tuesday night. The Predators were playing in town, so I was at that game. We went on late because of the State of the Union as well, so I didn't get home till about 11:15 on Tuesday night. My alarm went off before 5, went to the airport, caught a flight to Dallas-Fort Worth, transferred there, got on flight to Springfield, got there about noon or a little bit after, went and actually have a college roommate that oddly enough lives in Springfield, went and had lunch with him downtown, sat at a corner table, finished my notes, went to the arena, called the game at 6, hopped on the team charter afterwards, was back home by 11:30 at night. It was a wild day, but a lot of fun. at the same time, other than the last few seconds of that ball game for Belmont. And it's just kind of what you have to piece it together. You know, I've driven to games this year just to catch up with them. I've been able to ride the bus on the day of the game. I've flown with them. I've met them, you know, day of. It just every which way to just try and get there. And I have had to miss a couple games. I didn't get to go to the Virgin Islands with them because I had Titans duty at the time. But for the most part, I've been able to get to, I think, all but 4 of them throughout the course of the year. And it's a lot of fun.
So you guys are both Big Ten graduates.
Mm-hmm.
You from Illinois, Todd from Indiana.
We're gonna have a big game next weekend, Todd.
Yeah, sure.
You talked about
By the way, I grew up a huge Illinois fan, by the way. I still root for him, but I don't root for him over Indiana. I still root for Illinois.
I got D Brown over my shoulder there. So
there you go, D Brown. Those were good times.
He was my college classmate.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Hey, so you talked about breaking in by announcing Little League baseball games. I love that story. But who were some of the people as a kid or as a teenager that you like to listen to? You said, "Oh man, those guys, they impressed you." Why did you want to be a play-by-play guy?
Probably the very initial thing was coming home as a kid and listening to the Chicago Cubs. You know, whether that was on radio or whether that was Harry and then Chip and Tom Brenneman and all the guys who cycled through the booth on the TV side. You listen to it in the car radio going to vacation or baseball games in the summer, or you'd come home after school and the Cubs were the team, obviously, especially at that point where basically every game was a 1:20 afternoon game. Mm-hmm. And so whether I was in school or whether it was the summer, there was Cubs baseball on in the afternoon and parents weren't home, you know, so the TV was mine and I could turn it on in the playroom and go shoot hoops or whatever I was doing. And it was just kind of the soundtrack of my youth in a lot of ways. And I guess I was even realistic enough at that point in time, as much as I love sports, I guess I probably figured that it would be unlikely that I'd be playing down the road. And so how can I stay around sports in some way, shape, or form? And broadcasting seemed like the best part of it. And even to this day, I still think, you know, I love my job at News Channel 5 here. I've gotten to cover some amazing things and I love telling the stories that come with it. But there's nothing, I think Todd would agree with this, there's nothing like sitting courtside at a basketball game or in the press box at a football game and, you know, the band's playing and the crowd's filing in and it's just a big game and a big moment. There's nothing quite like that exhilaration unless you're actually playing in the game yourself.
And Todd, he talked about listening to the Cubs. Am I right? You used to sell hot dogs at the Cubs and the White Sox games as a kid?
That's true. Not for many, many years, from about age 15 to age 20. That's helped me support my way through college. I worked at both Cubs and White Sox games. I worked at other games as well. There was kind of a union in the Chicago area where once you got in, you could work pretty much anywhere. I worked a few Blackhawk games. I worked a few concerts. I did the summers were very, very busy and the money was really good. You got 20% of everything you sold. And that didn't include tips. So yeah, it was not unusual. And this is back in the 80s. I was making like maybe $75, $80 at a Cubs game, which was pretty good money it was really about 3 hours of work, maybe about 4 hours, but you had to get there early. And by the time you got done and get out of there, maybe about 4 hours of work. But most of the guys, some of the younger people don't know this, but back when I was a kid, people worked at Walgreens or you know, like maybe a local fast food restaurant. They were making $3.75 an hour. Mm-hmm. So to make maybe about $20 an hour was really good money. It was a lot of fun. You didn't really get to see much of the game. You were busy, but it was good money and a lot of fun.
We're just going to start calling you Side Hustle Ickow.
Yeah, that's what we have to do.
Hey, so Steve was talking about, you know, some formative people, but you were and he talked about having a roommate or a classmate that he met down in Springfield. You were classmates with Joe Buck. Did you know Joe in college very well?
I absolutely knew Joe Buck in college. He had a good friend that he grew up with in St. Louis who was a fraternity brother of mine. So we had met numerous times. I think we had one class together. We're both telecommunications, TV, radio majors, which is what it was in Bloomington at the time. Joe was a really good baseball player. I think he was on the IU baseball team for 1 year. I do remember one specific meeting I had with him. I was going into my junior year, and I think Joe was maybe going into his sophomore year. And he said, well, what do you have lined up for the summer? And I had just got hired by kind of Bloomington legend Joe Smith, who still works in Bloomington, still part of the IU network. He's been there since 1970. And I was going to be doing some afternoon sports casts. And once football season started, I was going to be covering the IU football team. And I was really proud of that. You know, I was excited that here I am. I'm going to be on the air. I'm going to do a lot of things. I'm going to be covering the football team and then the basketball team, which had just won the national championship at that point. And I said, well, what do you have this summer? And he said, oh, I'm doing AAA baseball in Louisville. And I thought, well, okay, you might be a little ahead of most people who are going to be sophomores in college. But he came from pretty good stock.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think it's well documented. I think he did a Super Bowl when he was 27 years old. So he's done all right. Harry, you know, in St. Louis, the Buck name is legendary.
Totally
and he's done pretty good for himself.
Hey, I do want to talk, Todd, a little bit about the Beacons. You know, tough start to the year. They've had some injuries, et cetera. Then they kind of got going, won a couple of games in a row, lost a couple of overtime games, but looked like a dangerous team. And then the other night, not so good. Just talk a little bit about the status of the Beacons.
You know, I think that the beginning of the season was a real slow start. There was a lot of turnover. They played poorly at times in the non-conference. Other times they played fairly well. And unfortunately, it just took a while to kind of figure out the rotation and who should be playing. And I think once that all settled down, they've played pretty well. Now, Indiana State's just a bad matchup for them. They've been blown out twice by Indiana State. They had one game against Bradley, which wasn't very close. Every other game in the league they've been in. They did win 4 out of 5 at one stretch, and then they lost 2 overtime games. Both games, they basically had one. They were up 7 at Missouri State with 3 minutes to go. They were up 3 in the final seconds against Drake in regulation. And they didn't hang on in either of those 2 games. If they had, you know, things would be looking a little bit different. I still think, yes, they're definitely a dangerous team. I think everybody would agree that Ben Krikke one of the most talented players in the league. And when you have a player like that who can really carry you, who's incredibly versatile and can do everything out on the court, they are a dangerous team. And Matt Loddick's done a good job, I think, of shortening the rotation. He's had a freshman in Maximus Nelson, who's played great basketball of late. He's become an extra weapon. They've gotten very good point guard play. They may be 4-11 in the league, but I think they're going to be a dangerous team, and they'll be in either the 8-9 or the 10-7 game. And I would not be surprised for them to win on Thursday in St. Louis.
Look forward to having the Beacons in St. Louis. Steve, the Bruins haven't been shaken by moving up in leagues to the Missouri Valley Conference. 1 game out of first place after a narrow loss against Missouri State the other night. Tell us a little bit about your just what you see in the Bruin ball club.
Well, it's been quite a ride this season. We've played 26 games to this point, and 9 of them have gone down to the final shot.
Wow.
So it's been nip and tuck from game 1 of the season when Cade Tyson hit a 30-footer against Ohio at the buzzer to win. And it's been a whole lot of fun. I think if you talk to Belmont people, even going back to the announcement a couple years ago, it's sort of been the story of the entire program, from the NAIA days up to Division I, into the Atlantic Sun fairly early on, then up to the OVC and now the Missouri Valley Conference. Every step, there's been people kind of wondering, is it the right time? Can Belmont take this next step? Can they compete at that level? And it was interesting. I feel like there were fewer doubters this time around, which tells you the job that Rick Byrd and now Casey has done there, Scott Corley and the athletics department and the entire university and the resources and the support. But I still think there were a lot of doubters who thought, how's the style going to translate and where are they going to fit? And Belmont was voted 6th in the preseason poll. This is a team that hasn't finished lower than 1st or 2nd in a conference regular season in 17 years. They were voted 6th. And so I think there was a little bit of a chip that came on the shoulder with that, okay, it's time to go up there and prove that this program can compete at this level. And I think they've definitely done that. But we've also found out that it is a totally different level. to be completely honest. I mean, everybody in the league can get you on any given night. And we just saw Evansville get a win the other night against a good Northern Iowa team. And obviously Todd just mentioned Valparaiso got hot and won 4 or 5 games. And so there's no such thing in this conference of looking at a game and saying, oh, we're home for this one, we're definitely going to win. Or we've got this team, we definitely have a win. There's just no game like that. And not to disparage any past opponents, but there were some nights in the past where Belmont could show up with its C effort and probably still win. That doesn't happen anymore. If you come with anything other than an A effort, home or away, you're going to be in an absolute dogfight and you're probably going to get beat. And so it's just been a lesson that you've got to be consistent night in and night out in this league. And so far, I think the Bruins have done a pretty good job at that, and we'll see if they can keep it up down the stretch.
Steve, when we talk to the different people on this program, we always ask them about places to go to eat. Now, a lot of the Missouri Valley Conference cities are not that big. Belmont's kind of the outlier. Belmont, Nashville and Chicago would be kind of the outliers. But give us a couple of places that maybe are some of your favorites in Nashville when you maybe want to go get something to eat or watch a sporting event.
Yeah, so I'll try to narrow it down. It's difficult. This is one of the best food cities in the entire country at this point, I think. But very near the Belmont campus, there's a neighborhood called 12 South. And I love that neighborhood. And there's a handful of restaurants there, Josephine, Urban Grub. There's a couple different taco places there. Edley's Barbecue, Martin's Barbecue isn't too far away from that. So just a bunch of good places. My favorite donut place is a place called Five Daughters. It's right there. So you can kind of get anything you want morning, noon, night around 12 South, and you're close to the campus. I mean, you could technically walk it, but it's a very short drive or whatever. Hotels aren't too far away either. Just in general in Nashville, though, I mean, there's some amazing restaurants. Some of my favorites are Rolf and Daughters, City House, Lachlan Table, Hall's Chop House, if you're looking for a great steak. And then shameless plug, my family are actually investors in a place called Black Rabbit downtown that has, this is other people's words, the city named it or voted it the best happy hour in town, and it was best new restaurant in 2017. So that's a pretty good spot in historic Printers Alley, just off of Broadway. So if you make it down there for a little music, I encourage people to move a little off the beaten path and check out some history and some good food and music in its own right.
Nashville, the bridal singles party capital of the world.
The bachelorette party capital. Bachelorette. I think we have officially taken that honor away from Vegas over the last few years. It's crazy. I actually live a block south of Broadway. It wasn't quite like this when I moved here 12 years ago, but man, if I walk out on a spring or a summer weekend, just outside, I got to go over to the Bridgestone Arena or something like that. I could walk 2 blocks and see 10 different bachelorette parties here. Yep. It's unbelievable. And then you got the pedal taverns and like the hot tub tavern or whatever is going around on the streets. It's definitely a party down here.
It's crazy. Todd, and in Valparaiso, Indiana, that bustling metropolis, where should somebody stop and eat if they're coming to a Beacons game?
All right, I may be slightly biased, but I will say that for a city of only about 30,000 people, Valparaiso has an unbelievable wealth of great restaurants. I think we probably would want to start somewhere close to campus. There's an outstanding steakhouse called Kelsey's. It's only about 2 blocks from campus. A lot of the teams eat there the night before the game. That would be maybe the most common. Real good place to go right next to campus is a Tomato Bar. It's kind of a pizza and sandwich place. It's got TVs all over. Nice little bar in there. Very, very popular. We've got an Asian restaurant that's about as good as any Asian. I've eaten all over the world, but a place called Kin Kao Thai and Sushi, which used to be basically a block from campus. It's now about 6 blocks away from campus. They moved in a bigger building, just moved recently, but about as good as it's get. And then downtown Valparaiso is loaded with a ton of really good restaurants. Some of the more popular ones, Blue Point, which has seafood and steaks, really, really good. Stacks is maybe the most popular restaurant in town. That's right downtown, about a mile from campus. You can get just about anything you want there. They got a great nightlife there as well. So there is a wealth of great restaurants in Valparaiso.
Final thoughts before we turn it back to Mike. Todd, tell Steve what he's going to experience at Arch Madness.
Oh, Arch Madness. Well, let's start with this. The Valley itself is as good as it gets. I like to say that. I've talked to Mike before, Jack Watkins before, what the league does in putting together that tournament, both in the arena and everything outside, all the activities going on at Ballpark Village. It's just so well done. And again, I've spent a lot of time in other leagues, just like Belmont. Valpo's moved up the ladder, first in the Mid-Con, then in the Horizon League and well-run conferences, but nothing like what goes on at Arch Madness. The fan support, again, the activities going on in Ballpark Village is always a blast. I've been there every single year to make sure at least one night I make it out there to see, the other fans. The hotels are all kind of within walking distance of each other, all within basically walking distance of Enterprise Center. And again, the league just does everything right. The communication that we have, like if a game is going to start 5 minutes late, the availability in the media room. I look forward. It's basically my favorite week of the year every single year. Now I hope Valpo can make some more big runs. It's been a few years since they made it to the championship game. I'm hoping to get 1 or 2 wins here this year. The longer we stay in St. Louis, the better.
It is an amazing weekend. Todd there in Valparaiso, Steve in Nashville, Mike's in St. Louis. I'm in Washington, D.C. today. Mike, what else do you want to tell us about the tournament and what fans and should be planning and preparing for?
Well, we are not the bachelorette capital of the world, but we'd like to think we're the basketball epicenter of early March. We have a tournament we're very proud of, and we're taping this on Friday, February the 10th, and we're 20 days out from our tournament startings, and it's going to be a great event. We've never had a team come off of Thursday, win the championship, and this is probably the year that could happen. Valpo was the only team ever to reach the championship game coming off of a Thursday opening round, but with 8 teams playing on that Thursday, we're going to have a lot of exciting basketball both Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Todd, the one thing I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that you don't play poker 5 days out of it. What 5 days don't you play?
Oh, that's right. I might have let me think what would be a day when I wouldn't play. Maybe Christmas might be a day where it'd be hard to find a game online, and I might be busy that day. Usually if there's a day that I don't play, it's because maybe there was a Valpo sporting event during the day, and got up, studied for the game, went to the game, maybe went out with friends afterwards, and never got around to pulling up the laptop that day. So 360 is a guess, but that would probably be a pretty good average of what it's been for maybe about the last 20 years.
I know Matt and the rest of the Valparaiso family would like 4 days in St. Louis where you're too busy to play poker. So we wish the Beacons last. And of course, Belmont having a great season, first season. And Casey has mentioned this many times that the team needs to bring their A effort, and everybody's going to have to bring their A effort in St. Louis to win a championship. It's going to be a great tournament. We can't wait to see both of you. Thank you for joining us today. And Harry, as always, thank you. And we're going to let you go, but appreciate you joining us for a few minutes today.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Good to meet you, Steve.
Yeah, great to meet you guys. And I would have loved to toss this in, but as a first timer here, you talked about Brandon in there and Greg. I mean, all of the SIDs have been unbelievable. It's trying to learn everybody else in the league and the arenas and everything have been unbelievably helpful. And Mike and your whole staff at the Valley's been unbelievably helpful. So it's been a great run from our perspective. And we're so thankful for all the pros around the conference and really looking forward to time in St. Louis as well.
Thank you, Steve. A lot of new faces, a lot of new places. But we're all going to convene in St. Louis in a few weeks. Thank you.
Can't wait, guys. Thank you.
All right,
See you guys. Thank you.
Take care.